My name is Marlene O'Hara. After 25 years of loyalty, I was fired in a cold, silent meeting. No thank you, no goodbye. It crushed something inside me I didn't even know could still break. But that betrayal sparked a fire. I didn't beg. I didn't crumble. I walked away and built something stronger with my own two hands. Stay with me until the end of this story. Tell me in the comments. Did I do the right thing by standing up for myself? Or should I have stayed quiet and kept my place? I really want to hear your thoughts. There are days that slip by without leaving a mark, and then there are days that carve themselves so deep into your memory, you feel them every time you close your eyes. That morning in Charlotte had started like any other, with the crisp bite of fall hanging in the air and the sidewalks brushed in gold and rust-colored leaves. I remember the hum of the city outside my window, the distant clatter of delivery trucks, and the comforting aroma of coffee wafting from the kitchen. If someone had asked me then, I would have said it was just another Tuesday. At Dominion First Bank, the building itself seemed frozen in time. The lobby still had that same green marble floor from the 80s, the same polished brass nameplate on the front desk. Upstairs, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a pale, cold glow that made everything. The cubicles, the endless rows of filing cabinets, even the people, feel slightly faded, slightly smaller. I remember smoothing down my skirt before stepping into the elevator, clutching a stack of paperwork to my chest like armor. Floor 4, Relationship Management, had always felt like a small town inside the bank. I knew every face, every coffee order, every sigh of frustration after a long call with a client. It was my world, and I'd spent the better part of 25 years tending to it like a careful gardener. That morning, though, something was off. It wasn't anything anyone said, not right away. It was the looks. Those tiny, uncomfortable glances that slid away when I met them. The way people I'd worked alongside for decades suddenly found the ceiling tiles very interesting. I should have known then. I should have seen it coming from the way no one met my eyes anymore. But denial is a comfortable thing, and I'd worn it like a second skin for so long, it barely registered. Garrett Finn had called a quick check-in meeting that morning. Garrett, all sharp suits and sharper smiles, the kind of man who could sell ice in a snowstorm. He'd been brought in 6 months ago to modernize the culture, whatever that meant. I'd tried to stay positive. Try to tell myself that change could be good, that maybe fresh blood was what Dominion needed. When I stepped into his office, the door swung shut behind me with a soft click that sounded more final than it should have. The room was all glass and polished steel, cold and impersonal. Garrett sat behind his desk, tapping a pen against a notepad, not bothering to look up right away. His secretary, a girl half my age with perfect hair and an even more perfect smile, offered me a watery glance before disappearing down the hall. I sat down across from him, balancing my hands carefully on my lap, waiting. He finally looked up, his expression a little too smooth, a little too rehearsed. "Thanks for coming in," he said, voice brisk. "I'll keep this short." I nodded, because what else could I do? Garrett leaned back in his chair and folded his hands behind his head like he was delivering good news. "We're going through some restructuring," he said, "trying to position ourselves better for the market challenges ahead. It's nothing personal. You've been with us a long time, and we appreciate everything you've done, but your role is being eliminated." He said it like he was reading from a script, no hesitation, no flicker of guilt. I stared at him, the words not quite sinking in. My mind scrambled for some explanation, some mistake. "You're letting me go," I said finally, just to hear it out loud, to make it real. He gave a little shrug, the kind you might give when telling someone the coffee machine was broken. "It's a tough call, Marlene, but necessary. You'll get a severance package, of course. HR will reach out." Necessary. Like pruning a dead branch off a tree. I sat there for a second longer than was probably appropriate, feeling the ground shift under me. Part of me wanted to argue, to demand answers. Didn't 25 years count for anything? Didn't the loyalty, the weekends, the skipped vacations mean something? But Garrett was already glancing at his watch, already moving on. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavier than they should have. My fingers brushed against the chair as I steadied myself. "Thank you," I heard myself say, voice thinner than I liked. Garrett gave me a quick, dismissive nod and turned back to his laptop. That was it. No ceremony. No goodbye lunch. No, we'll miss you. Just a few clipped sentences and a polite escort out the side door. As I stepped back into the hallway, the hum of the office seemed louder, harsher. The tapping of keyboards, the low murmur of voices, the squeak of a rolling chair, it all clattered against me like rain on tin. I walked past faces I'd known for decades, faces that now carefully looked anywhere but at me. Out in the parking lot, the air smelled of damp leaves and exhaust. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. I could still feel the tremor in my chest, the tight, burning knot of shame and disbelief. Somewhere deep down, a small voice whispered, "You should have seen it coming." And God help me, it was right. I don't remember leaving the building. One minute I was in that sterile hallway, the next I was standing outside with my purse slung over my shoulder, the autumn air nipping at my skin. It was too bright, somehow too sharp. Like the whole world was moving on without me while I stood there, blinking against the sun. I started walking without really thinking about where I was going. Past the brick storefronts, the little cafes with their chalkboard signs, the steady hum of Charlotte moving through another Tuesday. I ended up at Freedom Park, a place I hadn't visited in months. Maybe longer. It used to be one of my favorite spots, back when I still believed in taking lunch breaks, back when the world felt just a little more gentle. The park was alive in that stubborn way autumn has. Kids ran wild across the grass, their laughter piercing the air like little bells. Dogs tugged at their leashes. Joggers passed by with earbuds tucked in, focused on their own worlds. Everywhere, the leaves were falling, a slow, golden rain against the backdrop of blue sky and crisp wind. I sat down on a bench, the metal cold even through my coat, and just sat. For the first time in what felt like years, I had nowhere to be. No deadlines breathing down my neck. No one waiting for an answer or a signature or a final review. It should have felt freeing. It didn't. It felt like I'd been erased. I stared out at the playground, watching a little girl in a pink jacket clamber up the slide backward, her cheeks flushed with the effort. She laughed when she made it to the top, waving proudly at her mom. That laugh hit me in the chest harder than anything Garrett had said. There was a purity to it, a kind of undiluted joy I couldn't even remember feeling anymore. That's when the tears finally came, not big, dramatic sobs, just a slow, steady leak I couldn't stop. I wiped them away with the sleeve of my coat, trying to be discreet, like it mattered, like anyone would care. By the time the sun started to dip behind the trees, painting the park in deep oranges and bruised purples, I knew I couldn't sit there forever. I needed a place where the walls didn't hum with fluorescent lights, where no one would look at me like I was invisible. Willow and Hearth was only a few blocks away, a little coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. I'd spent more mornings than I could count there, nursing a cappuccino and pretending I didn't have 1,000 emails waiting for me. The place hadn't changed. Same cracked leather chairs. Same scratched-up wooden tables. Same hand-painted mural of a willow tree sprawling across one wall. I ordered a black coffee and slid into a booth near the window. I was stirring in a packet of sugar when I heard a familiar voice. "Mind if I join you?" I looked up. Judith Lane. Of all the faces I expected to see that day, hers wasn't one of them. She looked different, more relaxed somehow, but there was still that sharpness in her eyes, the kind that came from surviving more storms than you cared to count. I nodded, and she slipped into the seat across from me. We sat in silence for a minute, the sounds of the coffee shop filling the space between us, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional clink of a spoon against a mug. "I heard," Judith said finally, wrapping her hands around her cup like she needed the warmth. "Garrett's cleaning house." I let out a hollow laugh. "That's one way to put it." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I went through it too. 2 years ago. Different face, same game." I blinked, caught off guard. Judith had left so suddenly back then, no farewell, no explanations. I remembered hearing rumors, health issues, family problems, but nothing concrete. I thought you left on your own terms, I said. She snorted softly. That's what they want people to believe. Makes it easier. Cleaner. I didn't know what to say. My coffee had gone cold, but I sipped it anyway, needing something to do with my hands. Judith leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. Garrett didn't just stumble into this. He's been planning it. Bringing in his people. Pushing out anyone who remembers how this place used to run. The words hit harder than I expected. Somewhere deep down, I'd known it wasn't random. But hearing it laid out like that made the betrayal sharper, more personal. It was never about performance, Judith said. It was about loyalty, to him, not the bank. I stared out the window, watching a man in a business suit struggle to carry 2 paper bags against the wind. For a long time, I thought loyalty was the currency that mattered most. Turns out, I'd been trading in a currency no one valued anymore. You're not the failure here, Judith added softer now. You're just collateral damage. Collateral damage. I rolled the words around in my head, tasted their bitterness. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't broken, just bruised in a system that didn't care who it steamrolled. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop mourning what I'd lost and start figuring out what came next. I told myself it was just to pick up my things. Nothing more. Nothing less. But walking back through the glass doors of Dominion First Bank felt like stepping into a different world, one that had moved on without me and wasn't sorry about it. No one greeted me when I entered. No warm smiles. No casual waves. A few people glanced up from their desks, then quickly found something else to look at. A computer screen, a coffee mug, anything but me. It was like I'd been scrubbed from the building overnight, a ghost still haunting the halls by mistake. I kept my head down and made my way to my cubicle. The air smelled like fresh printer ink and something colder underneath, maybe resentment, maybe fear. I wasn't sure anymore. My desk looked the same as I left it. A framed photo of my niece's graduation. A ceramic mug someone had given me 15 Christmases ago. A small potted plant drooping sadly by the edge. It didn't take long to pack it all up. 25 years, reduced to one cardboard box. I was reaching for the last file folder when I heard voices coming from the small conference room down the hall. The door was cracked open just enough. I should have kept walking. I should have minded my own business. But something about the tone, that low hum of self-satisfaction, pulled me closer. Garrett's voice floated out first, clear and full of smug pride. I'm telling you, this is exactly what we needed. Dead weight like O'Hara was dragging us down. You clear out the old blood, you make room for real growth. There was a laugh, sharp, mean, from one of the department heads. I couldn't tell who. Maybe it didn't matter. Garrett went on, chuckling like he was sharing a private joke. You know how it is. These lifers think tenure means they're untouchable. They don't realize times have changed. We're building something new here, fresh, fast, efficient. Can't have a bunch of dinosaurs slowing us down. My hands tightened around the box, so hard I heard the cardboard crumple. Dead weight. Dinosaur. They weren't even pretending to hide it. This wasn't about performance or budgets or market challenges. This was about making space for people who looked better on paper, who could wear tighter suits and throw around buzzwords at happy hour. I stood there, listening to them toast their success, and something inside me cracked. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet, clean break. I had given them everything. Every late night. Every weekend phone call. Every time I stayed calm while a client screamed, or worked holidays because someone else called in sick. I had loved this place like it was part of my family, and they had thrown me out like yesterday's coffee grounds. I didn't cry. I didn't storm in and make a scene. I just turned around and walked back to my desk with a kind of slow, deliberate calm I hadn't felt in weeks. Packing the last folder into the box, I caught my reflection in the dark screen of my old desktop monitor. I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I finally saw what I had been refusing to see for years. I wasn't valued. I wasn't respected. I wasn't even seen. I reached into my purse, found a blank note card I always kept for emergencies, and scribbled 2 simple words. Thank you. I left it in the center of my now empty desk, tucked between the pot of withered leaves and the old photo frame. Not a thank you for the years. Not a thank you for the opportunity. Just a thank you for finally setting me free. As I carried my box out the door, past the cubicles and the coffee station and the break room where I'd once laughed over bad potlucks and birthday cakes, I didn't look back. Well, maybe just once. Right before the elevator doors slid shut, I let my eyes sweep over the floor, the worn carpet, the desks, the people still too busy pretending not to see me. I had thought I would retire there, that I would get a gold watch, a polite speech, a handshake for a job well done. Funny how we build these little dreams without realizing they were never ours to begin with. The elevator chimed softly, and the doors closed, cutting off the view, like a final page turning. I walked out into the chill of the late afternoon, box balanced in my arms, heart heavier than anything I was carrying. I didn't know what was next, but I knew it wasn't going to be here. The first call came the next morning. I was still in my pajamas, nursing a cup of coffee at my kitchen table, staring blankly out the window. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that buzzes in your ears when you're trying too hard not to think. My phone buzzed against the table. I almost didn't pick up. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone yet. But when I saw the name on the screen, Mrs. Langston, my fingers moved on their own. "Marlene," she said, voice sharp and anxious. "I heard you're no longer at Dominion. Please tell me it's not true." I pressed my palm against my forehead, willing myself to stay steady. "It's true," I said, my voice catching more than I wanted it to. "They're restructuring." There was a beat of stunned silence, then a low, furious huff. "Restructuring. Is that what they're calling it now?" Before I could find a polite way to respond, she barreled on. "I'm pulling my accounts," she said. "All of them. My husband agrees. If you're not there, we have no reason to stay." I blinked, stunned. "Mrs. Langston, you don't have to do that. I'm sure they'll assign someone." "I didn't trust Dominion," she interrupted, her voice hard. "I trusted you. There's a difference." We ended the call with awkward goodbyes, and I set the phone down, heart hammering faster than it had any right to. I thought it was an anomaly, an emotional reaction from an elderly woman upset by change. But then another call came, and another. Some clients were angry. Some were sad. A few were just confused, asking where they should move their money now that I was gone. The realization settled over me like a heavy quilt. They hadn't stayed because of the bank's glossy brochures or its loyalty rewards program. They'd stayed because of the work I'd done, the relationships I'd built. And now that I was gone, the foundation was cracking. By noon, my inbox was filled with personal emails from clients I'd helped through mortgages, college funds, retirement plans. People I hadn't spoken to in months reaching out, offering support, sharing their frustrations. It was overwhelming, and oddly a little exhilarating. I met Judith again that evening at Willow and Hearth. She waved me over to a corner booth, a second coffee already waiting for me. She always had a way of reading situations without needing to be told. "You look like you've been through a hurricane," she said, half smiling as I slid into the seat. "It feels like it," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. They're leaving. Some are asking where I'm going next." Judith tapped a finger against the side of her cup, thoughtful. "So, where are you going next?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I was thinking maybe I should just apply somewhere else. Another bank. Start over." She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You could. And you'd be fine. You're good at what you do. But why would you build someone else's house again when you could build your own?" I stared at her, thrown off balance by the way she said it. So simple, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Start my own business?" I said, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. "Judith, I'm 51. I don't know the first thing about running." "You know how to take care of people's money better than anyone in the city," she cut in. "You know how to earn trust. You know how to show up when it matters. That's 90% of the battle." I looked down at the table, tracing invisible circles with my thumb. Fear gnawed at the edges of my mind. What if I failed? What if I sank every penny I had and ended up with nothing to show for it but a pile of regrets? But beneath that fear, there was something else. A spark I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Freedom. I let out a long breath and leaned back against the booth. What if nobody follows me? I asked quietly. Judith smiled, soft and certain. You already have people waiting. The idea sat between us, fragile but alive. A seed just beginning to push through the soil, straining toward the sun. I wasn't sure I was brave enough. Not yet. But I wanted to be. Maybe, just maybe, losing everything I thought I needed was the only way I could finally find what I really deserved. I sat alone on a worn wooden bench in Freedom Park, a stack of papers resting heavy in my lap. The chilly breeze tugged at the corners of the pages, but I barely noticed. Judith had given me the sample contracts and business forms days ago, planting the seed of an idea I still wasn't sure I was brave enough to water. Everywhere around me, the park hummed with life. Children shrieked on the swings. Dogs chased each other across the grass. The smell of roasted peanuts from a nearby vendor floated on the air. Life went on. The world didn't stop just because my little corner of it had crumbled. I flipped through the papers absently, scanning words like client agreement and service terms, my mind a million miles away. These weren't just documents. They were a door to something I had never really let myself imagine, a life where I didn't have to beg for respect. A life where my worth wasn't decided in some glass-walled office by a man who thought of me as dead weight. But fear was a stubborn thing. It clung to my ribs, heavy and persistent. Was I really the kind of person who could do this? Could I build something from nothing? Or had I spent so long fitting myself into other people's molds that I no longer knew how to shape anything of my own? I leaned back, closing my eyes against the low afternoon sun. Memory after memory flickered behind my eyelids, blurry snapshots stitched together by decades of loyalty. Late nights spent calming panicked clients over the phone. Saturday mornings spent finalizing mortgage paperwork so a young couple could move into their first home. Tearful hugs from widows I'd helped navigate the nightmare of settling estates. Not the kind of moments that showed up on quarterly reports, but the kind that mattered. At least, they had mattered to me. I opened my eyes and stared up at the branches overhead, their leaves burning gold and red against the sky. Somewhere deep down, a question gnawed at me, quiet but relentless. If I stayed silent, if I kept bowing my head to people like Garrett, what would be left of me by the time I was truly ready to walk away? The answer was a hollow thing. A version of myself that no longer resembled the woman who had once loved her work enough to lose sleep over it. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across my lap. Marlene O'Hara? I looked up, squinting against the sun. Standing there was Walter Kingsley, owner of Kingsley Realty, one of the most respected businessmen in Charlotte. I had managed his accounts for years, helped him expand when others balked at the risk. Mr. Kingsley, I said, startled. I wasn't expecting. He waved a hand, cutting me off with a small, patient smile. I heard what happened, he said, voice low and steady. Garrett Finn must have taken complete leave of his senses. I laughed once, a short, dry sound. It's kind of him to be so decisive about it. Walter glanced down at the papers in my lap, then back at me, his expression sharpening. You starting something new? He asked. I hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. Thinking about it. Not sure yet. He sat down beside me without waiting for an invitation, his expensive jacket creasing at the elbows. Listen, he said, tone turning serious. You know my company's expanding next year. We'll need someone we trust to help us manage the transition, personal finances, investment structuring, you name it. I blinked. Walter, I appreciate that, but... He shook his head. No but. You were the reason I stuck with Dominion as long as I did. Not the bank. You. If you start your own shop, I'll be your first client. And I guarantee I won't be the only one. The words settled over me like a warm blanket against the chill. It wasn't just loyalty. It wasn't just pity. Walter Kingsley was a shrewd businessman. He wouldn't stake his fortune on sentiment. He believed in me. The thought rooted itself firmly in my chest, pushing against the walls of fear that had built up there for so long. For the first time since that terrible meeting with Garrett, I realized I had a real choice. Not a choice between swallowing my pride or starting over somewhere just like Dominion. A choice to build something of my own, on my terms. I looked down at the papers again. They didn't seem so heavy anymore. Maybe losing everything was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Maybe this wasn't the end at all. Maybe it was the beginning. The suitcase sat half-packed on my bed, clothes neatly folded in piles that didn't quite hide how much my hands had shaken putting them there. Tomorrow, I would leave Charlotte for a week-long course on financial consulting, the first real step into the life I was finally choosing for myself. For once, it wasn't someone else's plan. It wasn't a paycheck dangled like a leash. It was mine. I was halfway through double-checking my documents when the email pinged on my phone. I didn't recognize the address at first, a generic executive office handle from Dominion First Bank. But the subject line stopped me cold. Formal notice regarding client interference. My stomach turned as I opened it. Garrett's message was as cold and calculated as I should have expected. He accused me of encouraging client attrition, claiming that my unsanctioned communications had caused irreparable harm to Dominion's reputation and financial stability. He warned me to cease and desist any further contact with former clients or face potential legal action. Reading it, I felt the old panic rise, clawing at my ribs. The fear of losing everything again before I even had a chance to start. The fear they counted on. The same fear that kept good people quiet while bad ones thrived. For a long moment, I sat frozen, the glow of the screen casting harsh shadows across the room. Then something shifted. Quiet at first, but steady. No more. I wasn't going to let fear dictate the next chapter of my life. I moved to my desk, the one I had dragged out of storage and dusted off like an old friend, and opened my laptop. My hands still trembled a little, but there was a different kind of energy running through them now. Not panic, but purpose. I drafted the email carefully. Every word chosen not for anger, but for truth. Subject: response to formal notice. To whom it may concern. I received your communication regarding allegations of client interference. Let me be clear, I have not initiated contact with any Dominion clients regarding my departure. The individuals who have reached out to me did so of their own accord, expressing dissatisfaction with the changes at the bank. Further, I believe it is important to note the pattern of behavior by Dominion's management, particularly Mr. Garrett Finn, that precipitated this situation. Over the past year, Mr. Finn has systematically pushed out long-standing employees without cause or transparency, undermining the trust and relationships that Dominion's success was built upon. Clients did not leave because of my actions. They left because the institution they once trusted chose to prioritize short-term optics over lasting relationships. Dominion First Bank did not lose its clients because of me. Dominion lost them because it forgot why they came to us in the first place. I have retained copies of all relevant correspondence and am prepared to cooperate fully with any external inquiry should you choose to escalate this matter. Sincerely, Marlene O'Hara. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send and copied the board of directors' general counsel address for good measure. My finger lingered on the touchpad after the email disappeared into cyberspace. The silence afterward was almost deafening. No dramatic music. No immediate applause. Just me, sitting in a small house with a half-packed suitcase, breathing a little easier than I had in months. I wasn't naive. I knew this might not be the end of it. People like Garrett didn't like being challenged, especially not by someone they had already written off. There might be blowback. Whispers. Legal threats. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. I stood up, stretching the tension out of my arms, and looked around my bedroom. It was still the same modest space it had always been. Floral curtains, a second-hand dresser, a worn rug that I kept meaning to replace. But it felt different now. Like the first true step away from the version of myself that had always believed I had to be grateful just to be allowed in the room. I finished packing, folded the suitcase closed with a satisfying click, and set it by the door. One more night in Charlotte, and then I'd be somewhere new, learning something new, building something new. I didn't know exactly what the future held. I wasn't foolish enough to think it would be easy. But the fear that used to paralyze me had shrunk down into something manageable, something I could carry without letting it steer the wheel. As I switched off the bedroom light, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror across the room. Not the version Dominion First Bank had dismissed. Not the woman they had written off as obsolete. Someone stronger. Someone who remembered her own worth and was finally ready to bet on it. The email was waiting for me when I checked my phone over breakfast. A mandatory internal meeting, it said, signed by Garrett Finn himself. The words were dressed up in corporate politeness, but the message underneath was clear. Show up. Explain yourself. For a moment, I considered deleting it, ignoring the summons entirely. What could they really do to me now? I was already gone, already building something they couldn't touch. But then a different thought settled in my chest, heavier and more honest. I needed to face him. Not for their sake. For mine. I drove to Dominion First Bank one last time, my car gliding into the parking lot that once felt like home turf. The familiar building rose in front of me, all glass and steel and broken promises. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself as I stepped out, the November wind slicing through the early afternoon like a blade. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, just as they always had. Only this time, I wasn't walking in as one of them. I was walking in as myself. The conference room was already half full when I arrived. A few of my old colleagues sat hunched around the long table, studiously avoiding my gaze. Garrett stood near the front, all smooth confidence and manufactured charm, tapping a pen against a stack of folders. Marlene, he said, smiling like we were old friends bumping into each other at the grocery store. Thanks for coming. We just need to clear up a few concerns. I took a seat near the door, back straight, hands folded calmly in my lap. I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to finish this. Garrett started talking, spinning a careful story about how certain departures had unintended consequences, about miscommunications and client misunderstandings. His voice was smooth, measured, the voice of a man used to controlling the narrative. And then he pivoted, sharp and sudden. Unfortunately, he said, some actions taken by former employees have negatively impacted Dominion's reputation in the community. Actions that could be interpreted as intentional. The room tensed. I could feel the shift, the way eyes flicked toward me, and then away just as quickly. Garrett smiled thinly, turning his attention fully to me. Marlene, would you like to explain your role in these events? It was a performance, and I was supposed to play the part of the shamed, apologetic employee. The one who stammered and pleaded and accepted whatever punishment he decided to dole out. But I wasn't that person anymore. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. The room felt smaller somehow, the air thicker, but I kept my voice steady. I didn't damage Dominion's reputation, I said, looking Garrett squarely in the eye. I didn't have to. A murmur rippled through the room. Garrett's smile faltered just a fraction. I didn't encourage clients to leave, I continued. They made that decision themselves, when they saw what this place had become. Garrett opened his mouth to cut me off, but I raised a hand, not shouting, not pleading, just asserting, and he actually stopped. You pushed out the people who built trust here, I said. You treated loyalty like a liability. You acted like relationships didn't matter, only numbers. Well, now you're seeing the results. I let the silence stretch, let them sit with it. And if you're so afraid of the truth that you need to drag me back here to blame me for your choices, I said, my voice lowering, hardening, maybe you shouldn't be leading this place at all. For a long beat, no one moved. The only sound was the low hum of the vents overhead. Garrett's face tightened, the mask slipping just enough for the room to see the anger underneath. But no one jumped in to defend him. No one spoke up at all. I gathered my things, slow and unhurried, and walked to the door. At the threshold, I paused and glanced back. No one would meet my eyes, not Garrett, not the colleagues who once shared potluck lunches and inside jokes. It didn't matter. I walked out into the chill, the late afternoon sun breaking through the clouds in fractured, golden beams. I felt weightless. like I'd shrugged off a heavy coat I hadn't even realized I was wearing. Later that day, I signed my first official client agreement. Walter Kingsley, true to his word, became the foundation stone of my new life. I signed with a steady hand, my heart pounding not with fear, but with something fierce and alive. Hope. Determination. Freedom. The little cafe smelled like fresh cinnamon and roasted coffee beans, the kind of scent that wrapped around you and made it impossible to rush. I sat by the window, my laptop open, a worn leather notebook beside it, and a mug of black coffee cooling slowly in front of me. No clutter, no urgent emails blinking red, no bosses breathing down my neck. Just me, my work, and a kind of silence that felt earned rather than empty. It wasn't anything grand, not yet. Just a handful of clients, most of whom had found me through word of mouth. Some were familiar faces from my years at Dominion. Others were new, referred by friends who trusted me before they even shook my hand. Every single one of them chose to work with me, not because of a brand behind my name, but because they believed I would take care of them. For the first time in my career, I got to choose, too. I didn't take on clients who wanted quick fixes or who treated me like a commodity. I built slow, steady relationships with people who valued what I brought to the table. No quarterly quotas. No sacrificing long-term trust for short-term numbers. Outside the window, Charlotte bustled on, golden in the late afternoon light. The world hadn't stopped spinning after everything that happened. Neither had I. Word eventually got around about Garrett Finn. Dominion's leadership had tried to patch over the cracks, but when too many of the bank's core clients walked away, even the most polished PR couldn't hide the rot. A formal review uncovered layers of mismanagement, aggressive downsizing, broken client relationships, toxic turnover. Garrett was quietly reassigned before the end of the quarter, stripped of his fancy title and walked out under a different kind of spotlight than he was used to. Dominion First Bank closed 2 of its branch offices before spring. Morale never recovered. The shine had worn off, and all that was left was a hollow building full of empty desks. I didn't celebrate when I heard the news. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice in the formal sense. It was just natural, like gravity pulling everything back to where it belonged. Some truths didn't need to be shouted. They just needed time. That afternoon, Judith found me at Willow and Hearth. She slid into the seat across from me with that easy, familiar grace of someone who had nothing left to prove. "You look lighter," she said, smiling over the rim of her cup. I returned her smile, without thinking. It felt good, effortless in a way it hadn't been for years. "Feels different," I said. Not fighting to hold on to things that were never really mine to begin with. Judith tilted her head, thoughtful. "You didn't have to destroy anything to win, you know. You just had to walk away. Let the truth catch up at its own pace." I nodded, letting her words settle between us. She was right. I hadn't set out to burn Dominion to the ground. I had simply stopped feeding it my time, my heart, my loyalty. And without those things, it collapsed under the weight of its own choices. That was the real victory. I closed my laptop, slipping it into my bag. A new contract was waiting in there too, signed that morning, another client who chose me, not because of what I used to represent, but because of who I was now. The sunlight outside was turning softer, casting long golden beams across the sidewalk. People passed by the window with shopping bags, strollers hand in hand with loved ones. The world kept moving, and I didn't feel like I was trying to catch up. I stood up, slinging my bag over my shoulder, and Judith rose with me. "You ready?" she asked. "More than ready," I said. We stepped outside into the crisp evening air. The streetlights were just starting to flicker on, catching the edges of the fading sunlight. I turned toward my car, but before I opened the door, I paused for a moment to breathe it all in. The city, the noise, the heartbeat of something alive and unfinished. I wasn't finished either. I wasn't broken or discarded or obsolete. I was exactly where I needed to be, and this time, I didn't have to ask anyone's permission to stay there. I smiled to myself, a small, quiet thing that carried more weight than any contract or title ever could. I didn't have to ask anymore. I didn't have to prove anything anymore. I didn't have to beg to be valued. I had chosen myself. And that was enough. I tucked the bag tighter against my side and walked into the evening, feeling the weight I had carried for so long finally lift off my shoulders. I don't have to ask for permission to live according to my worth anymore. And that is enough. Sometimes, the hardest battles we fight are the quiet ones, the ones where we choose to walk away from what no longer sees our worth. Not with anger, not with noise, just with the simple, steady belief that we deserve better. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're standing at that crossroads right now, wondering if it's too late to choose yourself. It never is. And if this story touched something inside you, even just a little, I hope you'll stay with me for the next ones. There are so many more stories to tell. Stories about losing, about finding, and about the strength it takes to begin again. I'll be here. I hope you will be too.